Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody is able to hear me. If you are not able to hear me, let me know. A very good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all the participants in today's ECHO session. We have some very eminent people with us who have joined us. We have Dr. Sachdeva, DDG TV, Dr. Behera, Chairman NTF, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Then we have Dr. Sarman Singh, Dr. Malik Parmar, and then we have Chairperson of Zonal and State Task Force. We have faculty from medical colleges, state TB officer, district TB officers, WHO consultants, students, and everybody else. Thank you for joining us, and a very warm welcome for today. Now, giving you an introduction of what we are doing today. We are all aware that based on the global evidence, there are frequent changes in the national PMDT guidelines, and it is very necessary for us at the district DRTB centers and nodal DRTB centers to be well equipped with this latest knowledge on newer drugs and the regimes that are being designed for management of these patients. The expert faculty at NITRD has been receiving several queries from different parts of the country for the opinion on management of these difficult cases. These could be cases with comorbidities, adverse drug reactions, or complex DST patterns, where designing a regime becomes a challenge. This issue was discussed with DDG TV, Dr. Sachdeva, and Dr. Behera, Chairman NTF. And in the discussions, it emerged that the nodal DRTB centers and district DRTB centers need to be supported for management of difficult DRTB cases. There is also a need to do capacity building of our DRTB sites so that they can manage these patients on a day-to-day basis. Hence emerged this idea of this initiative of managing these difficult cases through virtual platform. And we are starting a clinic difficult to treat TB cases in collaboration with Central TB Division, National Task Force, and the NITRD. This initiative intends to support the DRTB centers in their capacity building and in managing the challenging cases. To inaugurate this initiative, we have Dr. Kuldeep Sachdeva, our DDG sir. Sir needs no introduction. He is the torchbearer of our national program, and program has achieved new heights under his leadership. We also have Padma awardee Dr. D. Behera. He is the chairman National Task Force. He is a known pulmonologist, and he is the guiding light for this initiative. He's been director of our institute and has been head of the department of pulmonology and dean research at PGI Chandigarh. A very warm welcome to Sachdeva sir and Behera sir. Now I would request Dr. Sachdeva sir to inaugurate the session. Dr. Sachdeva sir. I think there is some technical issue where we are not able to connect to Dr. Sachdeva. Till we try to connect with Dr. Sachdeva, I request Dr. Behera sir, who's the chairman National Task Force and who's the guiding light for this initiative, to say a few words. Dr. Behera sir.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Nita, and a very good afternoon to all of you. Dr. Sachdeva, Professor Rajendra Prasad, I could see Professor Ashok Bharadwaj, and my dear colleagues from the medical colleges, faculty, the STO, DTOs, and other delegates. A very warm welcome to this webinar jointly organized by the National Institute of TB and Respiratory Diseases, the Central TB Division, and the National Task Force for the involvement of medical colleges in the NTEP. Friends, as you know that the world as a whole is going through very difficult times, and so also every aspect of the medical facility, the medical service is affected. So this is the time which we realized when I came to know that the NITRD is having a eco program. So then I discussed with the CTD and then Dr. Singla and the director of NITRD and some of my colleagues from JTF, Dr. Bharadwaj, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, etc. So we thought we should, why not to utilize this facility so that all of us come together and we can interact. In fact, we had a trial meeting. In fact, although this is officially the first meeting, but in fact, on 23rd of July, we had already a meeting and we had already had a webinar when we had a talk about, the TB control program during the COVID era. And also we had a case presentation. So we thought that was a trial run. We got very good response. And so therefore we thought why not to utilize and then all the three major institutes to come. Of course, Central TB Division is our leader and our leading partner. And therefore we can sort out many of our problems. We have actually in fact developed a sort of MOU or what is the concept. So that has been approved by Central TB Division, the NITRD. And also, that way we will take up cases. We have identified people, we have identified the experts, we'll have national experts, and then various issues will be taken up in every session. And there are so many webinars going on in the country, every society, everybody is going on, and unfortunately, nothing was happening in TB. Actually, I was quite upset about that, that even the professional societies related to the chest diseases are not taking up this as a, as a topic. So that was a little disturbing, but I think now we have got a good platform. And as Nita had told, it is very specifically, it is important for us that we know that managing DRTB had been a problem and is also still continues to be a problem. Let me tell you that I find it difficult. There are new drugs coming in, new regimens are coming in, and very frequently they are changing of new regimens, new guidelines, and then many other issues. So I think we need to be trained, we need to be sensitized what is happening. That is therefore this platform is created, and I think with time, with all your cooperation and this will go on. So with these few words, I wish this endeavor a good success and the best for the future. So thank you very much. Over to Dr. Nita.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for introducing our clinic. I think we are now able to join with Dr. Sachdeva, sir. Dr. Sachdeva will deliver his inaugural talk. Over to Dr. Sachdeva.
Thank you, Nita. Dr. Behera, the chairperson of the NTF and also a leading torchbearer for us, Dr. Rupa, all our colleagues. In fact, first let me congratulate NITRD, Dr. Rupa Chemistry for taking this. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I've been telling my officers that we should have an initiative like this. The prime reason Dr. Behera has articulated most of the issues with treatment of drug-resistant TB. What we noted is that each week we were getting at least one reference at Central TB Division on a particular case which was difficult to treat, and they needed drugs beyond the guidelines which we had sort of agreed to or issued in our PMDT national guidelines. And as you know, whenever you deviate from your national guidelines, it takes the form of either a compassionate use or use under research conditions. And we were generally issuing the clearance, because we wish to give that clearance in the interest of the patients, that patient should not suffer, even though this is not as per the standard treatment guidelines issued by the Central Division. But go ahead with the approval from your own local ethics committee and following certain guidelines of have patient consent, etc. And at the same time, we wish that there could be a group which could address the concerns of such people, such clinicians, because most of the references were coming from clinicians and they needed the guidance on this. A group which has been now constituted should ideally also then later on be able to convert this into a standard sort of a guidance, because as we move towards more and more patients being difficult patients being treated with such guidance, we will sort of move towards having a consensus on this. And the learning on ground with all the clinicians then also will come on the same page. At the same time, this will require assessing the diagnostic facilities for both first line drug resistance, second line drug resistance, and then designing those. I mean, we have all the facilities of first the line probe assay, the liquid culture, and also now the whole genome sequences, which can now actually give you a targeted, take you toward those targeted interventions. I'm very hopeful that over a period of next few months, we will be all coming together on the same page in the interest of patients and all, for clinician and institution. And again, congratulations to the NITD team and the support of Dr. Behra. And let's go ahead. I mean, we declare that yes, this is the first clinic, and we start with this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for your words of encouragement. And Central TB Division and NTF, Dr. Behra has been the guiding light for this initiative, and hope this initiative will go a long way and we'll be able to support the DRTB sites and in their capacity building. Thank you, sir. Dr. S. Sharma, Dr. Bharadwaj have just them to our clinic. Now, as a first step to this capacity building initiative, we have a didactic by Dr. Rupak Singla. He is head of the department TB and chest and is a national expert with CTD and is involved in framing and revising the national guidelines for TB and DRTB for several years. For this session, the expert is Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Dr. Rajendra Prasad needs no introduction. He is a known clinician and a teacher for more than 4 decades. He has been director of various institutes like Patel Chest and Safai. He has been president of 5 major associations of chest medicines in India. So we welcome you to our clinic, and he will be the expert for this didactic section. Now over to Dr. Rupak Singla for his talk on how to make the decision to treat DRTB patients as per PMDD guidelines.
Thank you, Dr. Neeta. Dr. Kuldeep Sachdeva, DDG TB, respected Professor D. Behra, Chairman of the National Task Force, Dr. Sarman Singh, Director of AIIMS Bhopal, Dr. S.K. Sharma, Dr. Malik from WHO India Office, the Chairperson of the several zonal and state task force, faculty of several medical colleges, Dr. Kumud Rai, Chairperson of the ECHO India, the STOs, DTOs, medical officers, WHO consultants, nurses, students, and dear colleagues. A very good afternoon to all of you. Today, if you ask me, it is a dream come true for me. I have been thinking about such an initiative where we can provide solution to various clinical issues being faced by peripheral nodal DRTB centers across the country, with the help of our national level experts. And these clinical issues could be making an appropriate regimen as per the current national guidelines, managing adverse drug reactions, or managing the comorbidity. We also wanted to have the capacity building of the nodal DRTB centers to manage such difficult cases. So both were the aspects. And a draft of this concept note was prepared. And when this draft was shared with Dr. Kuldeep and Professor Behra, both were very, very supportive and they gave their very valuable inputs. And then Dr. Kuldeep, with his vast experience of managing TB in the country as DDG TB, and Professor Behra sir, with his experience of National Task Force, they decided to take it forward. And then you see, nothing can stop. Once these two giants are together, nothing can stop any endeavor. And to add to the taste, we also had Dr. Malik along with his team of consultants. So with all this, today we have this clinic called NITRD, CTD, NTF, difficult to treat TB clinic. So that's where we are. And of course, we'll have a team effort along with the national level experts. And I'm sure the senior people like Dr. Soumya, she has given her best wishes from our office, the chief scientist of WHO Geneva. Dr. Katoch, the ex-DG ICMR, Dr. Randeep Guleria, is also, I think, held up in a meeting at the ICMR. He also has conveyed his good wishes. So all these people will keep on, and they have several chest physicians from the country. They will keep us guiding on this endeavor. And I feel nobody can stop us once all this, all the big people, all the experienced person of the country, they are with us in this endeavor. Regarding the technical and the operational details of this clinic, it will be still the final details are being discussed with Dr. Sachdeva, Dr. Behra, and the WHO team. And I'm sure in the next clinic, we will be able to share with everyone the details of the technical and the operational details. And as suggested by Professor Behra sir, today I'll be sharing some of the case studies from our institute, and through these case studies, I'll be discussing about how to make a regimen in difficult to treat TB cases as per the current national TB guidelines. Thank you. So as we discussed, we'll have the, in today's session, we'll have the case studies from NITRD, that is our institute, how to make regimen to treat DRTB as per current PMDD guidelines. So we'll be sharing few cases, and through this we will try to understand how to make a regimen. Coming to case number 1, this was a 59-year-old male complained of fever and cough for last 5 months. And when you look at the history of anti-TB medicines, January 20 to May 20, he started with a sputum positive case. He received this regimen of 2 months of 4 drugs, that is EHRZ, followed by 3 months of INH rifampicin, and did not improve. But here you note that at the end of 2 months, if somebody is smear positive, the genotypic test like CBNAT should have been offered, but the same was not done. At the end of 5 months, he was sputum smear positive, indicating he failed to the treatment. And when he came to us, the first line LPA showed INH high level resistance and rifampicin was sensitive. And the second line LPA, it showed fluoroquinolone resistance and second line injectables being sensitive. And the sputum for midget was awaited at that time. And this was the X-ray prior to treatment, and this was the X-ray after treatment. As you can see, there is progression of the lesions in the X-ray chest with the cavity appearing on the right side. So if you look at the mutation analysis, let me tell you, we must be very, very conversant with the mutation analysis. This is very vital in context of today to treat the case. For INH, he had CADG mutation present, indicating high level H resistance. That means high level of H will have no role in this case. And INHA mutation was absent. This indicates that a furamide can be given in this particular patient. For rifampicin, the RPO mute was absent, indicating the rifampicin is sensitive. Regarding the fluoroquinolone, although lab told us it is the FQ resistance, but you see, again we need to learn that how to further go into the details so that we know whether high dose moxifloxacin can be given or cannot be given. In GAIR-A, the MUT3A was present, but MUT3B, 3C and 3D were absent. And when all these 3 are absent, we know that even if it is FQ resistance, but high dose of the moxifloxacin can be given in this patient. And when we follow these cases as per the experience from India, 85% of the time this will be confirmed by the phenotypic test. So that means, and CTD, Dr. Sachdeva and his team has given instruction to all the laboratories of the country that you must report the mutation pattern based on which clinician can take a call whether high dose moxi can be given or cannot be given. Unfortunately, most of the laboratories even today are not reporting it, which is not correct. So I request all the STOs, all the medical college people to insist and ensure that this mutation analysis is provided to the clinicians. So the final diagnosis in this case was drug-sensitive TB treatment failure case, H mono resistance with rifampicin being sensitive, fluoroquinolone being resistance, but moxi high dose can be given, and DH2 pyrazinamide was not given. Again, you see, this is something, yes, of course, in the beginning it may not be available, but gradually we have to do the capacity building for the DST for pyrazinamide. As you will see as we proceed, it is very, very vital to know whether pyrazinamide is sensitive or not sensitive. So what regimen is to be given to this patient based on the information discussed so far? So of course, he needs to be given all oral H monopoly DR regimen of the country. And we know in our country, the basic regimen is 6 months of 4 drugs, that is levofloxacin, rifampicin, ethambutol, and pyrazinamide. But in this case, the FQ is resistant. So whenever FQ is resistant in this regimen, we see next step is whether we can give high dose moxifloxacin or not. In this case, as we discussed, high dose moxi was found to be sensitive. So because these mutations were absent, so the regimen, what will be the regimen is, we will replace levofloxacin by high dose moxifloxacin. And the regimen will be, you remove levofloxacin, you give moxifloxacin high dose, and rest of the 3 drugs, that is rifampicin, pyrazinamide, and ethambutol, will remain same. Now let us see if this was the same case, and the second LPA could have shown that no, even moxifloxacin high dose is also resistant, and the DS2 pyrazinamide is still not known. So in that case, what we will do is that we will replace levofloxacin not by high dose moxifloxacin but by linezolid. So the regimen will be linezolid, then rifampicin, pyrazinamide, and ethambutol. So the first replacement drug in H monopoly will be, after high dose of moxifloxacin, will be linezolid. Again, the same patient, another scenario can be that not only high dose moxifloxacin, but even linezolid is, even the Z is resistant. Suppose the lab tells you that the Z is resistant. So in that case, out of the 4 drugs, 2 drugs, that is levofloxacin and pyrazinamide, they cannot be given. So what will be the regimen in this case? So we have to replace levofloxacin and pyrazinamide by 2 drugs of these 3 drugs, that is linezolid, tofazamine, cycloserine. So these are the replacement drugs, linezolid, tofazamine, cycloserine, in the same order. In case high dose moxi is gone, we choose linezolid. In case pyrazinamide in addition cannot be given, then we add clofazimine. So in this case, we will be replacing the quinolone and the pyrazinamide by linezolid and clofazimine, and the final regimen will be linezolid, clofazimine, rifampicin, and ethambutol. So coming to the next case, this was a 14-year-old boy. He came with complaints of fever and cough for last 9 months. And when we went back to the history of anti-TB medication, from March 18 to July 18, he was found to be smear positive and received the first line drugs, that is category 1, usually for. He was irregular and he took it for 4 months and then defaulted. Then again, from July 19 to April 20, he was smear positive and he was given so-called category 2 along with the injection, and the rest 4 first line drugs. He was regular this time, given for 9 months, but he failed to the treatment. When he came to us, his sputum was positive, that is 2+, and the first hand LPA showed high level H resistance and rifampicin resistance, and the second hand LPA showed fluoroquinolone sensitive. So he was MDR with fluoroquinolone sensitive and second hand injectable also sensitive. And the sputum for midget was abated, as usually happens in the field. Looking at the X-ray earlier, that is in the June 19, and then in April 20, there was extension of the lesion with the cavity appearing on the right side. So again, going back to the mutation analysis, for H, it was CATG mutation present, indicating high dose INH cannot be given, but INHA mutation was absent, indicating that ethionamide can be given. At rifampicin, RP mutation was present, indicating rifampicin is resistant. Then looking at the fluoroquinolone, in GAIR-A as well as GAIR-B, all WT present, but P was absent, indicating that the fluoroquinolone is sensitive. So it was MDR with H high dose and fluoroquinolone injectable being sensitive. So the final diagnosis in this case was based on the history and the drug resistance pattern. Retreatment pulmonary TB case in a child. MDR TB with rifampicin resistance with H high level resistance. INHM mutation not present, that means ethionamide can be given. And there was no fluoroquinolone or injectable resistance. So what regimen again? The question was what regimen to be given? So this was MDR without FQ resistance, without injectable resistance, and without ethionamide being resistant. So the regimen will be, of course, shorter MDR regimen. And this regimen is intensive phase to give 4 months, which can go up to 6 months in case severe remaining positive at the end of 4 months and 5 months. And the drugs are 7 drugs in the intensive phase, consisting of moxifloxacin high dose, pyrazinamide, ethambutol, clofazimine. They are given throughout IP as well as CP. And in the IP, we have addition of kanamycin, ethionamide, and high dose iron. In the continuation phase, which is fixed for 5 months, we give moxifloxacin high dose, pyrazinamide, ethambutol, and clofazimine. And one very important point to know is that this is a package of treatment. No replacement is possible. Yes, in case of any adverse drug reaction, for short periods, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, one can withhold a drug and can reintroduce. But in case some drug needs to be replaced, then this shorter regimen has to be stopped and we have to go for all oral longer regimen. So another point very important is that whenever we think of shorter MDR regimen, we need to see what are the criteria for inclusion and what are the criteria for exclusion. Only then we should start using the shorter MDR regimen. So the criteria for inclusion of patient for shorter regimen include that patient should be rifampicin resistant MDR without any resistance to fluoroquinolone or any second line injectable. In all extrapulmonary TB, the shorter regimen can be given except in disseminated TB, CNS TB, and meningitis. It can be given to children, like in our case was a child. It can be given to PL-HIV cases, but only for pulmonary TB. In case there is a PL-HIV with extrapulmonary TB, even lymph node or pleural fusion, then shorter regimen should not be given. And in case a patient has taken more than 1 month of second line drugs, and we have a report from a reliable lab that DST to fluoroquinolone injectable is sensitive, again the shorter MDR regimen can be given. Looking at the exclusion criteria, which is very important. So in these situations, we should not be using the shorter MDR regimen. And they include pregnancy. Why pregnancy cannot be given? We have to give injections, and also it contains ethionamide. Both are, ethionamide is indicated in the first trimester and injection throughout. Then if there is any intolerance or toxicity to any medicine, the shorter regimen requiring the stoppage of the drug, again it cannot be given. If patient has used the second line drugs for more than a month and the DST to the fluoroquinolone is not available, there also we cannot give the shorter MDR regimen. If there is INHA mutation, as I told you, if there is INHA mutation, then it indicates ethionamide is resistant, again it cannot be given. If there is a resistance to pyrazinamide, whenever it is available, in case it is resistant, again it cannot be. So just to recapitulate, contraindication of shorter regimen includes disseminated TB, CNS TB, and meningitis, PL-HIV with any EPTB, INHA mutation, which indicates ethionamide being resistant, and resistance to pyrazinamide. And presence of CAT-G mutation, mind you, in case there is a CAT-G mutation, which is resistant to high dose INH, as of now, it is not a contraindication for the shorter regimen as per our current guidelines. Now, it's very, very important, you see, people start giving shorter regimen without knowing the indications and contraindications. So, I am presenting this slide to, again, re-emphasizing things. So, if patient has taken fluoroquinolone for more than a month, second line LP report is not available. Can we give it? No. In case patient has INHA mutation, can we give it? No, because it indicates ethionamide resistance. If patient has HIV with a lymph node TB, so HIV with extrapulmonary TB, can we give it? No. In case patient is 12 years of age, that is a child, can we give it? Yes, in children it can be given. If patient has pyrazinamide resistance on visit from a certified laboratory, can we give it? No. Then if patient has INH CAT-G mutation indicating high level INH resistance, can we give it? Yes, we can give it as per the current national guidelines. But also I'll also like to tell you that although today it is not there in our national guideline, but we know the WHO consulted guidelines for DRTB 2020 have already been published, and the Central TB Division is going to take a call on this, maybe within a month or so, to discuss about these guidelines. And what these guidelines are suggesting is that for MDR rifampicin resistant TB patient, without being exposed to second-line drugs for more than a month, without having any fluoroquinolone resistance, and there is no extensive TB disease and no severe extrapulmonary TB, in these situations, what WHO guidelines are suggesting is that the preferred regimen will be a shorter all-oral beta-glucan containing regimen, which is same as the current injection containing regimen, except that the injection has been replaced by 6 months of beta-glucan. So in the injection, we are giving 4 to 6 months in the shorter regimen, but here it will be replaced by beta-glucan. So I need to clarify again. As of now, in India, we are giving injection-containing shorter regimen. Only once these guidelines are deliberated upon in the Central TB division with the expert group, and they adopt this, only then this will be applicable. But there are high chances that this may be adopted. But till that date, till that time, we will be giving injection-containing shorter regimen. Coming to case number 3. This was a 12-year-old male, again a boy, came with fever and cough for 8 months. If you look at the history of drug intake, which is very vital, that in December 19 to May 20, he was put on positive at the beginning of treatment, that is December 19. He received 2 months of 4 drugs and 4 months of 3 drugs, that is category 1. And again, if you look at this, why I'm asking for comment is that we always, in such cases, we should ask the patient whether you are subjected to any genotypic test at the end of intensive phase or not. It should always be done so that we can catch these cases early. Then at the end of 6 months, Kutam strain was positive, so he failed to this treatment. And when the LPA was done at our institute, there was high-level INH resistance, rifampicin resistance, fluoroquinolone resistance, and second-line injectable being sensitive. So this was MDR with FQ resistance, making it pre-XDR, and Kutam for midget was still awaited. This was the X-ray pre-treatment, and at the end of treatment, you can see there was bilateral extensive lesions. So it had deteriorated. Then, as we always do, we look for the mutation analysis. For INH, CADG mutation present, high dose INH cannot be given. INH mutation Fs and Bs, furanamide can be given. Very vital information. For rifampicin, RPOB mutation present, that means rifampicin resistance is there. For fluoroquinolone, in GAIRE, MUT3B was present. So as we learned, MUT3B, 3C or 3D, if any one of them is present, that means high dose moxifloxacin cannot be given. So in this case, not only this patient has FQ resistance, but even the high dose moxi cannot be given. So the final diagnosis becomes based on the history and the laboratory reports. Drug sensitive TB treatment failure case, pre-XDR TB, that is FQ resistance plus fluoroquinolone resistance, and even high dose moxi cannot be given, and DH2 pyrazinamide is not known. Next question is, what regimen to be given? So you see, whenever we have these kind of scenarios, we follow a basic dictum in our institute, and I think all of us who are dealing with the drug resistance TB, we should follow the same. First step when we are deciding what a regimen is, you go to the details, what drugs patient has taken, what drugs patient has not taken. Second step is you look at the laboratory reports. We may have a DST showing drugs are sensitive. We may have a laboratory report showing the drugs are resistant. Then there will be few drugs for which the DST is still awaited. So based on this information, our first choice always should be the drugs patient has not taken, and the lab is also telling us it is sensitive. So they are the best drug to be used in that patient. Second choice is patient has not used the drugs, but the DST is awaited. It is not telling us it is sensitive or resistant. That should be the second preference. The third preference should be that although patient has used the drugs, but lab is telling us it is still sensitive. So here we cannot count the drug as 1, we will count it as a 0.5 only. And the last preference, that is the fourth preference, could be the patient has used the drugs and the DST is not available. So here we presume, till proved otherwise, the patient is resistant. And then we have the drugs not used by the patient, but a certified lab is saying it is drug resistant. So these drugs must be avoided. Unless we are cornered, we should not be using these drugs. And in case patient has used the drug and lab is also telling it is a resistance, never give this drug. You are just adding the adverse reaction to the patient and adding cost to the patient as well as the program. So these drugs should not be used, the last category. So coming back to this patient, if you see, based on the history and based on the lab reports, patient had taken only first line drugs, and the second line drugs patient has never taken. Looking at the lab reports, for injection and furanamide, lab is telling us it is sensitive. And for the drugs which are resistant, that includes INH, rifampicin, levofloxacin, and moxihide high dose as per the second NMPA. And for rest of the drugs, that is pyrazinamide, linezolid, clofazimine, PAS, cyclosin, etc., the DST was still awaited. So going back to our classical way of choosing the drugs. So drugs not used but DST showing sensitivity, all the three injectables and etionamide. Drugs not used but DST is not awaited. This includes PAS, bedaquiline, delambanate, imipenem, linezolid, clofazimine, PAS, and cycloserine. So drugs used by the patient but DST is still sensitive, nil. Drugs used by the patient but DST is not awaited, that is pyrazinamide and ethambutol. Then drugs not used, DST showing resistance, that patient has never used the quinolone but still he is resistant, including high dose INH. And drugs used, DST showing resistance is INH and rifampicin. So now we know which are the drugs we can still use. Let us see how to proceed. You see, can we give shorter regimen? Definitely no, because he is also resistant to the fluoroquinolone. So then suggested regimen will be the all oral longer regimen. And as we know, whenever the shorter regimen cannot be used, our next choice is all oral longer MDR-DB regimen. So now before we go for all oral longer regimen, just let me brief you how these guidelines for all oral longer regimen were framed in our country. I'll just take 2-3 minutes. You see, as per WHO guidelines, Group A, we have levofloxacin or moxifloxacin, bedaquiline, linezolid. So as per Indian as well as WHO guidelines, we should try to include all three of them. Then Group B includes clofazimine and cycloserine. We should add one or both of them depending on, I'll come to that guideline. And then we have Group C. In case we are not able to make a regimen of 4 or 5 drugs, in that case we have to go to the Group C. And mind you, in this case, the drugs are in the decreasing order of usual preference. And here the preference is by the WHO is ethambutol, then delambanate, then pyrazinamide, then injection of imipenem, cilastatin or meropenem, then injection of amikacin or streptomycin, then etionamide, and lastly is the PAS. So this is what the WHO guidelines have suggested. Let us see what the Indian experts took a call in the national expert group meeting. So WHO says you initially must have 4 drugs, and then followed once the bedaquiline is stopped, you should have at least 3 drugs. But in Indian experts, they felt that in India, you know, among the MDR-DB cases, the chances of acute resistance is almost to the tune of 24%. So 1/4 of our MDR in our country, unfortunately, are resistant to fluoroquinolone, even if they have not taken it. And then the adverse reaction to linezolid are so common that there are chances that we may have to stop linezolid in between. And you know, in the field conditions, to stop a drug or to add a drug is always a big challenge. So the Indian expert decided that instead of 4 and 3, we will have 5 and 4. So we'll be choosing the 5th drug, that is cycloserine upfront. So the regimen suggested by the Indian experts and approved by the Central DB Division, the PMDT committee, it was you give 18 months to 20 months of 5 drugs, which has bedaquiline to be given only for first 6 months, levofloxacin, linezolid, clofazimine, and cycloserine. And linezolid dose was to be reduced after first 6 months to 300 mg. And some cases like HDR-DB, we may have to extend the treatment duration to 20 months. In that case, the linezolid dose will go as 600 mg up to 8 months. Now let me explain you, with many people ask, why are we different from WHO for the replacement sequence, which is very, very important. Like coming to one by one, WHO suggested Group C, first step should be ethambutol. But in our national drug resistance surveillance, we found that among MDR, the resistance to the ethambutol could be to the tune of 45%. So the expert decided no, ethambutol will come much, much lower down as a replacement drug. Second, they have suggested is the delambanate, and we all know as of now there are big availability issues for the delambanate. So again, it was decided that only when bedaquiline cannot be given, we may think of delambanate if it is available, otherwise not. Then comes the pyrazinamide. In the NDRF survey, it was found that among MDRs, the resistance to pyrazinamide is quite high, to the tune of 31% in new cases and 20% in the primary MDR cases. So it is to be given only when we have a laboratory report when that it is sensitive, then it will be the first drug of choice. You see again, if you notice here, in case we have pyrazinamide DST available, then only we can choose it, otherwise we will not be able to choose this important drug. Next WHO suggested is the imipinab or meropenem. We all know the cost of these drugs. We know the logistic issues. It requires central line to be inserted. It requires infusion of these drugs 1 to 2 hours in the morning, 1 to 2 hours in the evening. So practically in the field condition, it is out. Then we have amikacin or streptomycin. In case amikacin cannot be given, yes, it is the second drug in the sequence, provided it is sensitive. Next drug is ethionamide by the WHO. Yes, that will be the next drug in the sequence. Then we have PAS. Yes, in India also, that is the next drug in the sequence. So combining this information together, in India, the replacement sequence in all over a longer regimen if drugs cannot be used is pyrazinamide only if sensitive, amikacin only if sensitive, ethionamide only if sensitive, then PAS and ethambutol. And lastly, we will be choosing imipinam, cilastatin, meropenem, along with the amoxicillin clavulanic acid, provided in case we are found out. Erythromycin is no more a replacement drug in the WHO guideline or the Indian guideline. Coming back to our case, so the issues in our case are, he is a case of drug sensitive TB patient, treatment failure. He is having pre-XDR TB, fluoroquinolone resistance, and moxie high dose cannot be used, and the issue to pyrazinamide is not done. So now let us see from this group A, B, and C how to make a regimen. I think everybody should be very attentive to this. That is how we make a regimen. So first drug from group A is levofloxacin or moxifloxacin. So levofloxacin, can it be used? No, it cannot be used because there is a FQ resistance. So next choice will be high dose moxifloxacin. Can we use it? No, because in our case it is high dose moxi resistant based on the mutation 3. So that means this drug needs to be replaced. Next in the group B is, group A is the bedaquiline. Can we use bedaquiline in this case? No, because the age is less than 18 years of age. And the good news for all of us is that the CTD has informed us that recently the DCGI has approved the use of bedaquiline from 12 to 18 years of age. But let us wait till we have the formal intimation from the CTD. And I must congratulate DDG-TB Dr. Kuldeep Sachdeva for all his efforts to make these such good drugs available for our children also. So delaminate next is the delaminate of bedaquiline cannot be given because it is not available at that time with us. So we cannot give it. And again, we think of the replacement sequence. So from group A, we cannot give levofloxacin or moxifloxacin. We cannot give bedaquiline. So we have chosen linezolid for this patient. From group B, the clofazimine, cycloserine, both can be given. So we have chosen both. So we have 3 drugs with us. Now next comes group C. And we have mentioned already what all drugs are there in the Indian replacement sequence. And let us see one by one. Pyrazinamide, can we give it? In this case, no, because DST is not available. Can we give amikacin? Yes, because second NLP has informed us it is sensitive. Can we give ethionamide? Yes, because there was no INHA mutation. Ethionamide can also be given. So amikacin can be 4th drug. Ethionamide can be the 5th drug. PAS, there is not required because we already have a 5-drug regimen. So, dear friends, in this case, the regimen will be from group A, linezolid, from group B, clofazimine and cycloserine, and from group C, amikacin and ethionamide. So, taking all of this together, the regimen for this boy will be linezolid, clofazimine, cycloserine, amikacin, and ethionamide. That's how it is. Now, coming to the case number 4, that is the last case of today. In view of the time constraint, I'll be discussing only 4 cases. In case time permits, I can discuss one more case. So this was a 60-year-old female, known case of PLHIV. So 60-year PLHIV came with fever, vomiting, headache, and altered sensorium for 2 weeks. She was started on category 1 ATT as a case of PTB in March 20 based on clinical basis. So no sputum was available at that time. However, the non-contrast CT scan of the head now when she came to us showed because of the symptom we got it done, white matter edema. And she was unable to give sputum. The CSF, when the lumbar puncture was done, it showed ADA to be high. And the CSF for CBNet was done, it showed MTP detected and rifampicin resistant. So one good news is that CBNet can help in many cases of TB meningitis and by CBNet. And here it helped us by telling us that MTP was present, it was rifampicin resistant. And this was the X-ray, so she had PTB as well as she had the CNS TB. So issues in our current case are rifampicin resistance TB, the PLHIV, disseminated TB with CNS and pulmonary TB. Can we give shorter regimen? Of course not. We have this the EPTB, PLHIV, disseminated TB, so we cannot give. What is the next choice is, in this case, will be the all oral longer regimen. But again, mind you, it is not so simple. She is 60 years of age, she has PLHIV, and she has CNS TB. So once we have CNS TB, we really need to see what all drugs can be given, what all drugs cannot be given in a CNS TB case with PLHIV. So let us see one by one. For levofloxacin, moxifloxacin, ethionamide, prothionamide, cycloserine, linezolid, and vipinab, these drugs, they penetrate the CNS well. The high-dose INH and pyrazinamide, they can also reach the therapeutic levels in the CSF, and they may be useful if the strains are susceptible. Then one must remember the PAS and ethambutol, they do not penetrate the CNS well and should not be counted at all as effective drug for MDR-TB meningitis, so they should be better avoided. Amikacin and streptomycin, they penetrate the CNS only if the meninges are inflamed. Then there's a little data on the CNS penetration of clofazimine, bedaquiline, and delamanid. But because these studies were not done in these cases, but otherwise they are considered to be very effective, clofazimine, bedaquiline. So in case we are having a case of CNS TB, we should better use them. And again, to recapitulate, not good drugs for CNS are PAS and ethambutol. The other drugs like levofloxacin, moxifloxacin, linezolid, cycloserine, ethionamide, pyrazinamide, and amikacin, they can be considered good drugs. Although the CNS penetration for bedaquiline, delamanid, or clofazimine is not known, there is limited data, but they are otherwise considered as good drugs. So based on this information, we should treat a CNS TB preferably with a regimen containing group A, all the three, that is fluoroquinolone, bedaquiline, linezolid, and from group B we can pick up cycloserine, injection amikacin, and streptomycin only if we have a report saying DST is sensitive. In this case, they are not available. And clofazimine and ethionamide may be used if they are required. In children with seizures, instead of vipinab, we should prefer meropenem. So coming back to our case, from group A, we can choose levofloxacin, bedaquiline, and linezolid. Yes. From group B, can we give clofazimine, cycloserine? Yes. From group C, so we already have 5 drugs. So these are replacement sequence, but it is not required because we have already made a regimen with 5 drugs. So the final regimen for this patient, considering group A, B, C, and the CNS TB will be from group A, all the 3 drugs. From group B, all the 2 drugs. And from group B, C, we do not require it. And so the regimen proposed for this patient will be levofloxacin, bedaquiline, linezolid, clofazimine, and cycloserine. So, message to carry home.
I think before you wind up your presentations, we can take the questions.
Yeah, I'm finishing it. So, the message to carry home, dear friends, will be we should follow the steps to make a regimen. We consider the history of drugs taken, drugs not taken. Look at the DST pattern and the mutation analysis, which is very, very important. And I request once again to all the laboratories that they must report the mutation analysis, specifically for whether high-dose moxi can be used or cannot be used. Then regimen should be made by taking these 2 things into account, that is history of the drugs intake and the DST pattern. And for shorter regimen, whenever we are choosing, we must see whether there is any exclusion criteria or not. In case it is, we should not be using it. And in the country, we need the strengthening of the laboratories. This is for our dear friend, Dr. Kuldeep Sachdeva, DDG-TB, that clinicians, we have always been demanding, requesting the CTD that although we have very good laboratory network, but they still need more strengthening. And we need to keep in mind the replacement sequence if it is required. So thank you all. Thank you very much. And specifically, I would like to acknowledge Professor Behra, Dr. Kuldeep Sachdeva, Professor Rajendra Prasad, Dr. Wadhwa, our director, Dr. Malik and his team from WHO, all colleagues and well-wishers. And last but not the least, let me tell you, I will not be sitting here in case the students like Vikas Kumar, Dr. Mitesh, and all the faculty, all the dean students and senior residents of this institute were there to help me out. I thank you all very, very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Singla. Thanks a lot. I was just requesting you to wait for the last so we could, carry home those messages. But thank you so much. We have lots of questions on our chat, and you might have answered some of them, but I will repeat them again so that if there are the concepts are clear. The first question comes that if there is RIF resistance on CBNAT, but LPA says RIF sensitive, along with INH and FQ resistance, what should we do?
You see, in this case also, this is diagnostic algorithm is very, very clear. In case there is a disparity, like first we do CBNAT, it says RIF sensitive. And then we do RIF resistance, suppose, and we do LPA to know about the H level resistance, and it says it is sensitive, so there is a disparity. The third test to be done is the CBNAT again. And then we take a call that if 2 of the 3 tests are saying resistance, it is taken as resistance. If the 2 of the tests are saying sensitive, it is taken as sensitive. And simultaneously, we put up the specimen for culture DST also. This is very clearly mentioned in our national integrated DRTB algorithm. So, and we need to follow it also.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Singla. Before I take next question, if somebody has any burning question, they can unmute themselves and ask the question. Meanwhile, I'll ask you the second question. It says that in pleural fluid CBNAT, there is MTB detected low and RIF resistance. However, there is no lung parenchyma pathology. What should we do?
Can you repeat, please? Just.
Yeah, it says in pleural fluid, they did a CBNAT where there was MTB detected low and there was RIF resistance, but they have no lung parenchyma pathology. So what should we do?
You see, ideally, let me tell you, as per our current national guidelines, we should not be doing the CBNAT for the pleural fluid, as the yield is expected to be low. Secondly, as you mentioned, the MTB was detected low. Especially in case it says MTB detected very low. So in these cases, the rifampicin resistance pattern is not reliable. So better my first step will be, and also you know that in extrapulmonary TB, the chances of drug resistance, especially in pleural TB, are less. So unless this patient has a history of contact with a case of DRTB at home or in the workplace, first step will be, even in that scenario, I would like to repeat the pleural fluid for the CBNAT. I would like to send this sample for the culture DST also. But in case the repeat sample also says it is RIF resistance, I would like to consider this case as a case of RIF resistance and would like to give him the, in case he is not a HIV case, I would like to consider shorter FDRTB.
Rupak, can I just come in at this stage? I'd like to, of course, congratulate you on your excellent presentation, and with a lot of clarity, you see, you have conveyed the message. In that specific case on the children where we could not, as on date, give bedaquiline, I think delamanid as an option is there in the country, and we should keep that in mind. You know, delamanid is now more frequently available than earlier. So just for the viewers, that delamanid could be given in children. That was always been there in the guideline, but procurement issues were the matter of concern when we were thinking of the drug. The second is this specific question on pleural fluid. I would say that the CBNAT, if it says MTB detected, whether it is low or very low, the MTB part of it is correct. But as far as resistance is concerned, for the resistance, we have to be a bit cautious. As you have rightly said, if it is very low, we would like to repeat it. But otherwise, if it is just low, then depending upon, you see, the past history of the patient and all, one can take things into consideration before deciding on the regimen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think maybe you joined late, because when we were discussing the case, we clearly mentioned that once bedaquiline could not be given, we need to consider delamanid. However, because delamanid was not available, and even today, the availability of delamanid is a challenge in the country. So our first choice was delamanid, but since it was not available, we had to go for the other drug. And anyway, thank you for your comments.
Dr. Singla, may I come at this stage?
Yes,
Dr. Singla.
Yes, sir. Please.
First, I must congratulate for this great idea and your great presentation. You have made very well. One more thing I would like to say, as you said, that the pleural effusion, usually we don't advise the gene expert. This is unnecessary wastage of the money and unnecessary. First thing, that in pleural effusion, since it is a possibly disease, what we have experienced in last 4 decades, very a rare chance of getting the MDR TB in a pleural fluid. So these tests must be used very cautiously. And I think the way you presented it was very good, and such type of things should continue. That's my message, very clear message.
Thank you so much, sir. We need blessings and guidance from experienced people like you, and I hope you will continue to give your.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, sir, to be here and give your opinion.
Dr. Singla, can I come in here?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Hello. Yeah. It was a nice presentation. You amply made clear the reasons for actually managing how to make or how to design the regimen, the tailor-made regimen for that. And of course, the significance of mutation pattern, which you have said now the laboratory should back the clinician with this report also, which is lacking. Hope it will be clear. My question to you is that you have actually treated all these 4 cases. Now, what was the outcome in these cases? How the patient responded? Will you be able to tell me patient-wise, which patient you see got cured in what manner? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Janmeja, for your question. And all these cases which we are presenting here, they were discussed in our DRTB committee, and they are being under follow because they belong to our area, and all 4 of them have done very well so far, and all 4 of them are under follow. Because that is the idea of making a good regimen. And you see, as I discussed, sir, I know your question is basically whenever based on the mutation analysis, in case it says the high dose moxi can be given, this was a big question in mind, and Dr. Sachdeva had kept a specific meeting of clinical experts and microbiologists to see what happens. So they collected data from 4 main laboratories, and then it was discussed that in case the mutation analysis suggests it is sensitive based on the mutation, and when the midget report is available, in 85% of patients, the midget also says it is sensitive. On the other hand, in case the mutation analysis shows it is resistant, then of course the midget proves it is resistant in only around half the cases, 50% of cases. In rest 50% of cases, we feel midget says it could have been given. So definitely what the message to carry home is that in case mutation analysis report is there, which should be there as per call by the DDG-TB, and it says it is sensitive, we should consider moxifloxacin high dose in those cases. Although, again, as far as the theory goes, they say it will not be a very, very effective drug. We should count it only as 0.5. But yes, it is a non-injectable drug. It is an effective drug. So we should choose these drugs in such cases. Thank you once again, sir.
I think Dr. Singla, one more suggestion, that in your future presentation, when all the cases like you have presented, when they complete the therapy, then in one of the meetings, you must discuss their outcome.
Sure,
and
sir.
if there is any fallacy between the reports and the outcome, and that should be very clearly discussed, right?
Very good idea. I think we'll definitely incorporate this in our concept note also. That they need to discuss maybe after 2, 3, 4 months what has been the outcome.
Yes.
Sure, sir. We will do that.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. And the next question is, can we? The next question is, can we replace injections in shorter MDR-TB?
Okay, again, you see very important question. As we mentioned, in shorter regimen, not only injection, no replacement is permissible. It's a package of treatment, whether injection, whether it's ethionamide, whether clofazimine or whatever it is, none of the 7 drugs can be replaced. Yes, in case of adverse drug reaction for 2-3 weeks, in case we need to stop the drug, hold the drug and start with the low dose and then full dose, that is permissible. But the stopping a drug is not permissible. Then we have to shift to the all oral longer regimen.
Thank you. The next question is, if there is already a CAT-G mutation why INH is being used in shorter MDR-TB.
Yes, again, this question, this question comes up every time and very logical question that INH, the CAT-G indicates high dose INH resistance. There could be two reasons for this. One is that the evidence on this, when we have the CAT-G mutation, high dose INH is resistant, the outcome is still not very strong with us, whether the outcome is poor or not poor. Secondly, you see INH-A indicating zona-1 resistance is already the contraindication. And in case CAT-G also becomes a contraindication, so all INH resistance becomes a contraindication to the use of this. So all MDRs in the country who are H and R resistant will be out of the shorter H. So that will be the another outfall of this decision. So in that case, all H resistance, lower high, and any diff resistance will be the contraindication for the use of it. So then we really have to see what should be done in these cases. And as we have more and more evidence of H high dose resistant affecting the treatment outcome badly, definitely we will have to have a reason. I think the question is very valid.
How do we deal with latent TB in DRT cases? Oh, sorry,
Nita,
yes, sir.
just on the previous question, because on the chat also I saw that question, someone had raised a query that can we use amikacin in place of kanamycin. That can be used. I mean, so within the injections, you see one could replace. Though one cannot replace the injection in the shorter by any other drug, but within the injection group, you could replace one injection with the other injection in case of availability issues are there or something like that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That's a great information. How do we deal with latent TB in DRTB cases in Indian context? What would be our strategy based on WHO guidelines?
You see again this the use of drug for latent TB. As per current Indian guidelines, all this context of DRTB patients, they are just to be followed up. In case there is a symptom, we need to do their early CVNAT and go ahead. But as we are aware, the ATS CDC ERS guidelines, which came in late 2019, they have produced evidence that in these cases, one can use a fluoroquinolone along with another drug for 6 to 12 months. And this another drug, they say, should not be pyrazinamide. So this issue of whether to give some form of chemotherapy to these patients of context of MDR-TB with this fluoroquinolone plus another drug needs to be debated in the national expert group by at the CTD. Only then we will be able to use this kind of drugs. As of today, as per the PMDD guidelines, all the context of DRTB cases, at least INH is not to be given. That looks logical also. And this other drugs to be used or not to be used. As of now, we need guidance from the PMDD. But as per current guideline, the no drug has been recommended. They just need to be followed.
Thank you. There are several questions concerning delaminid and bedaquiline. That if they don't have delaminid, can they add bedaquiline in children? And if yes, what age?
Okay. You see, as I clarified also, as of today, as per PMDD guidelines in the country, bedaquiline can be given 18 years and above, and delaminid 6 years and above. Now, recently we were informed in one of the meetings by DDG-TB, Dr. Kuldeep Sachdeva, that DCGI has approved the use of bedaquiline up to 12 years of age and above. But they still have to take out, because there must be some formalities within the CTD, they have to take out a circular that bedaquiline can be given up to 12 years of age. Till that time, no. So the question of replacing delaminid by bedaquiline will come only when we have this circular that 12 years and above bedaquiline can be.
Thank you. We have a question from Dr. Prince, which I did not understand. If Dr. Prince is there, can you ask your question?
No, ma'am. You addressed it. CAT-G and high dose INH. You already addressed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Prince.
Thank you.
Then we have a detailed question from Nodal DRTB Center, Nasik. So if they are there, can you put up your question? Nodal DRTB Center, Nasik. I think they are not there, so maybe we take this question later. Then we have a comment from Dr. Rishi Saxena saying that injection streptomycin can be used in drug-resistant CNS TB. Is it a banned drug?
No, it's not a banned drug. Let me tell you, as per the current international guidelines as well as the guidelines of the PMDT, amikacin in case cannot be given streptomycin. These are the two drugs which have been suggested by them. And even in PMDT, these two have been approved. And the other drugs like regarding the caprimycin and kanamycin, the WHO has generated evidence that they can rather be leading to more of ADRs and more of deaths. So these two drugs are still under discussion about whether they can be used or not. But amikacin and streptomycin, yes. And regarding CNS TB, both of them they cross the meninges in case the meninges are inflamed. So that is the information as of today.
Thank you, Dr. Singla. We have floated the polling so that you can give us your feedback. Meanwhile, I'm taking more questions. Can bedaquiline be given in PLHIV? Is it safe to give?
You see, in PLHIV, yes, bedaquiline is safe to be given. Only thing is, there are some drug interaction which could be there, especially like the drugs like lopinavir, ritonavir, efavirenz. Efavirenz increases the metabolism of bedaquiline, so the blood level may be low. On the other hand, drugs like lopinavir, ritonavir, they can reduce the metabolism of bedaquiline. So, accordingly, it may be indicating a high level of bedaquiline, leading to more of cardiotoxicity. So, whenever we are giving bedaquiline in MDR-TB cases, we need to see these drug interactions, and we need to see that there should not be any increased cardiotoxicity by these drugs. Otherwise, as such, bedaquiline is not contraindicated in case of the HIV patients. So always consult the HIV medical officer on these issues before we decide about the regimen.
Can cycloserine be given in PLHIV and with CNS TB?
You see, cycloserine has nothing to do with the PLHIV. Cycloserine as such, it is a drug which has CNS side effects. It can precipitate the convulsions and it can cause psychosis, it can cause depression. So only from that angle, one may have to think regarding the cycloserine, whether the drugs can be given. But otherwise, whether PLHIV or no PLHIV, as per my knowledge, it can be used.
So the last question that I have on my chat is, why bedaquiline and clofazimine in CNS DR-TB, as they have doubtful penetration, why not replace them?
You see, the reason for not replacing is, they are doubtful means not many studies have been done on that. It doesn't mean that, like even for EPTB, if you look at the literature, very few studies have been done about these drugs, like because most of the studies have been done in pulmonary TB. And they are group A and group B drugs based on their efficacy and based on their low level of the adverse drug reaction. And you know, CNS TB is a life-threatening situation. Here we want to give the best to the patient, the best possible drugs. So that is the reason that in these cases, if there is a choice, we would like to choose these drugs as a first choice. It is just lack of sufficient evidence that they have not been used in these studies. That's all. It is not, logically speaking, they should be effective in the EPTB cases also.
Thank you. We have certain questions which are quite detailed, and I think we can take them on later on or on one-to-one basis, because they have given complete case history which will be a discussion. So I think we will stop here, and I would now like to thank people who have joined us. Meanwhile, please keep filling your feedback that we have floated. I would like to thank at the onset Dr. Sachdeva and Dr. Behera for this initiative, for supporting NITRD to come out with this initiative. Our director, Dr. Vadva, who though was not able to join but has conveyed his wishes for this clinic. Then we have Dr. Rajendra Prasad, Director AIMS has joined. Thank you, sir, for joining us, Dr. Guladia. Then we have Dr. Sarman Singh from AIMS Bhopal. Thank you, sir. Dr. S.K. Sharma, Dr. Rohit Sareen, Dr. Bharadwaj. Then we have Director and faculty from MTI Bangalore. Thank you for joining us. Then we have SGO Delhi and other state TB officers, STDCs, chairmen and members of National Task Force, Zonal Task Force and State Task Force who have joined, faculty of medical colleges, DTOs, medical officers and students. And I would like to thank our ECHO team, Dr. Sunil Anand, Mr. Gaurav, Mr. Shivam, and Samiksha, who have been with us in all our clinics and supporting us to carry on these clinics flawlessly. So thank you, and we welcome all your suggestions. You can send them by mail to us, and we would be, many of you have asked for sharing the presentation. We will be sharing them. We had a clinic on 27th July. We have shared the presentation of Dr. Behra, as well as the YouTube link where you can see the clinic on the YouTube. And we will be doing the same for this clinic. So please send your suggestions how we can improve. Many people wanted to join us today, but they could not because we had a limit of 500 people, and I think almost 100 to 150 wanted to join more. But they could not join us. So in the next meetings, we will take a bigger connection where more than 1,000 people will be able to join us. We are working on that, and in the next clinic, definitely everybody who wants to join will be able to join. Thank you very much for being there and supporting this clinic. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, please. Thank you.